eventually, though, and be like, Brad said to focus on Twitter this week or something, just to stoke something there.
All right. But with that said, welcome on, welcome all. We're back for Team Review Tuesdays, where we go through your respective fantasy football teams. All you have to do to be a part of this is quite literally just DM Jackson on Discord. You'll see the link plenty of times on here. I want to say there's even, I think, a QR code of some variety that you can use to access, in which case he'll walk you through on exactly how to get your team on here, and hopefully we'll have you on here. Now, with that said, sit back, relax, and let's go through these teams. So we'll go be zooming in and out of these teams to figure out your various settings as well as those are in here. So for RB 10-man full PPR, should you make any changes? All right, so let's see what we have here. You have Bo Nix, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, CeeDee Lamb, Portland Sutton, Trey McBride, Kenneth Walker, Tank Bigsby, Zach Charbonnet. Let's see here. Mika Ibuka, Austin Eckler, Jaden Higgins, Marvin Mims, and Rashee Rice. Realistically, there's not a lot of changes that you would need to make at all. If anything, like I would consider pivoting off of Alvin Kamara. I'm also not the biggest Derrick Henry stan, but it's all about your personal kind of preference, right? So what I would recommend more than anything is that like pivoting off of one of these two would be my bare minimum thing. I think you could upgrade and get even more depth if you really wanted to. I wouldn't be expecting as much mobility from Bo Nix this year because that was primarily caused to the just lack of a run game whatsoever. So he's not somebody that I'm particularly excited to start on a week-to-week basis, but I think he'll ultimately be fine. But the rushing floor that you're probably anticipating that he had from last year probably isn't going to be the same. So realistically, this just isn't my dream running back core for what it's worth. But I really like Kenneth Walker, and I love how you paired that with Charbonnet. So realistically, you have one elite running back guaranteed, and more than likely one of these two will honestly be fine. I just think you can tier for higher. Your receivers are sick, though. Really, really like how your receiving room is set up. And realistically, once Rice is back, he's going to be put in that flex spot. So ultimately, like this team is more than fine, but I would consider doing some sort of pairing to pivot off of Bo Nix and one of these running backs. In which case you could probably trade for like Jaden Daniels and maybe RJ Harvey or James Conner or something. In which case you're getting like a very similar level of like projection and floor, but a more elite quarterback that you can rely on consistently. All right. With that said,
and this person also asked for start sits this week. I think they're looking pretty good, but what do you think, Wells?
I think this is exactly how you would have it to start this week. I wouldn't change anything. All right, on to the next one. We have Brock Purdy, Drake London, Devontae Adams, Bijan Robinson, Tony Pollard, Brock Bowers, and DeAndre Swift. Okay, and the bench. Yeah, I think this team's really strong. Trying to think what I would potentially change, but first let's see what settings we have. Abu, 10-man happy BR you're in. Should you have a solidified start sit, or should it be matchup dependent? Okay, let's look at this. I think you could say it could be matchup dependent. Like, I like Devontae Adams. I think he and Garrett Wilson are realistically very similar bets this season. Jameson Williams could easily take a step forward. So it's like your receiving core is very sick. Very excited about what you're going to get there. My concern is more so about like the flex. Like DeAndre Swift is fine for now. In fact, I think people become very excited about him towards the early part of the season. The bigger question for me is like, how does he really fare for this team as we get further down the stretch? And that I'm not as sold on. Amari Cooper, I would be very surprised if he is relevant in any sense of the word. I think we can find a better upside swing than that. But ultimately, like these core four you have right here between Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams, Jordan Addison, and Zach Charbonnet, very, very strong. Dameon Pierce, I like the upside swing there. Decent bit, but like I guess the biggest advice I would give for this team is like I think you can really upgrade your flex here and just do a 2-for-1 package kind of deal. But for who, that's going to be an entirely different conversation. Realistically, if dependent upon the league mate, you could probably take like DeAndre Swift and Garrett Wilson, considering they're like kind of low floor players. Maybe DeAndre Swift is a bit higher than I care to admit, and package them together for like an elite player. I'd imagine somebody would at least be willing to hear it out because Garrett Wilson was going around like the early part of the third, if not earlier than that, this summer. So I think that's the only thing I would consider really doing here. Outside of it, I really like it. Jameson Williams could be a smash. I think you could be kind of annoyed with like the week-to-weekness of your wide receiver too, but ultimately I think it's fine. And then Brock Purdy should be good, but like I'm always going to try to like tell you guys go after a mobile quarterback if you can because of the floor and ceiling they provide. All righty. Whoa, what the? All right, my computer decided to go crazy there. That was interesting. Need to see anyways. Bardo, 16-man PPR. Okay, also got an offer. RJ Harvey for Rashee Rice. Oof. I wouldn't be giving away RJ Harvey for Rashee Rice as much as I love Rashee Rice. I think we can get him for a different deal. I like the nicknames for each player as well. That's pretty crazy. And this is 16-man, so very deep squad.
Pretty great for 16-man.
Yeah, this is really strong for a 16-man. I feel like you could probably move a little bit differently as well in terms of like you could probably get some even better upsides. Like I'm not a big Diggs person, but I know a lot of people are willing to buy into like what they know of the past with him. I'm not sold he's going to be that same player he once was. So I would consider at minimum potential like seeing what you can field out for Stephon Diggs. If you can get like Demario Douglas plus in a format like this, I think that's worth your time. Brenton Strange is like a fine dart throw, but like realistically, like you can probably get a little bit more value from him in a league like this. But I think you might be playing like the contingent side of the argument, might be how you're looking at this. I feel like for a 16-man league, it's pretty strong. Jalen Coker's on IR, so that was more than likely prior to the injury. And not sure how many true IR spots you have, but I know you have Ayuk there. Trying to think if there's anything really super crazy you could be doing with the squad. Overall, I think it's pretty strong for a 16-man. Like this is very strong. I know, I like it.
With that few bench spots in a 16-man, would you be rostering Brenton Strange?
That's what I'm saying. It's like I understand why you would theoretically be doing it, but at the same time, like I think you could just like take him and Diggs or something and turn it into something else. I think it'd be more worth your time. All right, on to the next one here. Let's make sure we got the settings right. 12-man PPR, 4-point passing touchdown, no tight end premium. Awesome. So mobile quarterbacks are more valuable in this format. Because you have Jalen Hurts, you really don't need Trevor Lawrence. I do think Trevor Lawrence is going to be a little bit more valuable this season, so if you can kind of like put him together in a package deal, I'm not opposed from it. Let's see here. I don't think you need to start both J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey, but I see why you're doing it. Trying to think of what to do here. So I would move RJ Harvey here. I think J.K. Dobbins is fine, especially if he like is overhyped in week 1, which I think is very live to happen. It'll likely be more fantasy relevant than I care to admit as well. I'm trying to think of the best.
Might be worth Ridley. He started Ridley over Dobbins at the flex.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it just because I think it'll have a higher floor than what Dobbins will likely have this week as well. I would just consider doing some trade packages for this team because I think you can take it a step forward with what you have here. Like you have some very, very strong pieces. It's just like you don't realistically need Trevor Lawrence. Colson Loveland's fun, but you really don't need him on this squad. Like you can upgrade your flex spot is realistically what we're kind of pointing towards here. Like that can be better than what you currently have. Matthew Golden's fun for a swing, but like you can even upgrade for some, like, I just think you can take pieces from this squad and upgrade it to make it even better because you have a lot of very, very strong early pieces and good late stashes that should have more value as the season progresses. But yeah, all right, on to the next one. Check the settings. 10-man PPR from the 103. Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, Chuba Hubbard, Brian Thomas Jr., Xavier Worthy, Mark Andrews, Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen, Keon Coleman, Jerome Ford, Caleb Johnson, Tucker Kraft, Trevor Lawrence. So similar thing with what we kind of said with the last team. Trevor Lawrence isn't really a necessity on this team. Like he doesn't add any value because you have Jalen Hurts that you bought that early. Chuba Hubbard's I'm not the biggest Chuba Hubbard guy, and I'm not the biggest Tyreek Hill guy. But with that said, you can realistically upgrade this team further if you really wanted to, but it all depends on how you potentially want to do that. I like Xavier Worthy a lot because of just what Mahomes has been working on this offseason. It seems very live that the deep ball will be live, and who knows, maybe takes a step forward. Crazier things have happened. Really like the BTJ, like Saquon, like Jalen Hurts. Just Chuba, I'm worried about the receiving usage that he's going to have that really drives his kind of production, but he should be strong. Mark Andrews, I have concerns about touchdown regression, so I prefer Tucker Kraft at cost. I don't know. I would just be considering to move off of Tyreek Hill and Chuba Hubbard, but that's just kind of me more overanalyzing things than anything. Jamison Williams is a really good swing to have as well. I think you could really just kind of tier up some players here. It'll make your roster even stronger and solidify it even better, just because you have the depth to do it. And that's all there really is to say. On to the next one. A lot of people love Chuba. 10-man half PPR, and where should you prove on / look to trade? I'm going to tell you the same thing about Chuba. Kamara, I'm also worried about the amount of touches he has. I love that you took Christian McCaffrey. I like the AJ Brown pick. I like the Jalen Waddle. A little skeptic about Kelsey, but like I think he's somebody that could just be like somebody that casual people that go to really quickly just because they are very familiar with the name and they see the production early on in the season. Because I do think he's going to get a massive boost with Rashee Rice off the field. So I like him for the early part. So I would be considering to move off of Kelsey, but like I want to keep him for the early part while like Rice isn't there, right? Kamara and Chuba are guys that I'm just not super attached to. I love that you have both RJ Harvey and Isaiah Pacheco. I think they're actually some pretty strong values. But because of how people look at Chuba and Kamara, I think you can realistically tier up from them. But it all depends on kind of how you want to do that. Because this flex spot, I'd like to be able to put RJ Harvey in, ideally. And realistically, if you combine Chuba Hubbard and Alvin Kamara, you can probably get yourself like a first-round running back, if not a receiver, depending upon like how you specifically want to play it. I'd be looking more towards a running back, though, considering the consistency you get, and we want that for. But yeah, really strong team here, man. Really like it overall. All right. And also, if you don't like Jalen Waddle, like you can technically apply it to him. I just think he's mispriced by the market and is going to be the wide receiver one there, but that's neither here nor there. All right. Josh Allen, Trevion Henderson, Travis Etienne, Nico Collins, Drake London, Colston Loveland, Xavier Worthy, Mika Ibuka, Lamar Jackson. So we got a super flex squad. Full PPR, 10-man super flex. Keon Coleman is available, but you're not certain who might be worth dropping for him. You don't need him for one because like your receivers are sick. If anything, I would consider like packaging some things together to try to like improve your running back here because like Etienne isn't somebody I'm super confident in, and I don't think you should be either. This is an area of concern for me. Like you have some very strong receivers, but we need more consistent running back production. So I'd be willing to sell some hype on Emeka Egbuka ahead of the season because like, yeah, I'm sure he's going to be great. Don't get me wrong, but like, what if we are overhyping the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Like the price on him is at a very much of a premium. Well, take a chance that he could be not worth the cost that he's currently going at to tier up off of Etienne because it's just like I want something that I can basically trust a lot more in earlier rounds, and I think the combination of Etienne and Egbuka could easily get you there. You have Ricky Pearsall, who's essentially the exact same bet as Egbuka. In fact, you could use him as a negotiation piece as well if you really wanted to. Like you have a few different pieces that you can pair together here between like Egbuka, Pearsall, Diggs. And realistically, Dobbins you can throw into the equation because a lot of people like to act like really sharp because they're like, oh, J.K. Dobbins is going to be hyper fantasy relevant. It's like he could be, but he's also barely made it through any NFL seasons. So we'll see what happens there. But your quarterbacks are beyond elite. Not sure how you pull that one off, but yeah.
And Jordan Mason's a decent option as a backup FWIW.
Yeah, I always forget. Jordan Mason's going to be great. On to the next one here. So let's check out Uneasy times MH, 12-man PPR. Alrighty. We have Dak Prescott, RJ Harvey, Kenneth Walker, Devontae Adams, CeeDee Lamb, Brock Bowers, Ricky Pearsall, Keenan Allen, Pop Douglas, Matthew Golden, Caleb Johnson, Woody Marks, J.J. McCarthy, Bashal Tootin. I mean, the only thing that you could really do to make this team any better is trying to get a mobile quarterback, which I think you can do considering you have Dak and J.J. McCarthy. Like I do think Dak's likely going to be very fantasy relevant, and you have the stack with CeeDee Lamb, so it's really honestly fine to just keep him as is. But like this is a very, very, very strong team. You could argue to like try to tier up to an even higher quality receiver than off of Devontae Adams, but that's entirely up to you. I think it's a very, very strong team. You have a lot of pieces. There you can trade up, but overall, very, very strong team.
You're underwater a bit, Wells.
Classic. Overall, just a very strong team is kind of the main gist here. All right. Check it out here. 12-man PPR. Lamar Jackson, Tank Bigsby, RJ Harvey, Drake London, Malik Neighbors, George Kittle, Marvin Harrison Jr., Zach Charbonnet, Ray Davis, Chris Olave, Kyle Pitts, Khalil Shakir. All right. So I like Tank Bigsby. I think he's great, and he's going to be able to fill in kind of production to get that bridge to Tootin that we want. So I think this is a fine play. But ultimately, I would like to have a higher floor and ceiling for one of my other running backs. Marv, I have concerns about the true level of volume there. So realistically, I don't know. It all depends on kind of how you want to play it. This team is fine. It's going to work out fine for the early part of the season. But, like, I wouldn't be opposed from, like, tearing down from Lamar Jackson to get a more elite running back and then getting a Drake May, for example, later. Because he should be able to have a higher level of production than most people are expecting. Like,
I would wager that, like, one of Marv, Neighbors, or Olave will be lower in value by the end of the season than they are right now. So it'd probably be good to get off one.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I would keep the receiving core as is. I definitely agree with the concerns with Marv and Olave. Neighbors, I do have concerns as well. But, like, people are just always going to pay that premium for him considering what he did in his rookie season.
Yeah, totally. But just like to your point of improving the RB room.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, that's kind of the main gist of what to theoretically do with this squad. Overall, solid team. And then again, because you have George Kittle, you do not need Kyle Pitts here. I get you want to live the dream, but, like, the dream has been dead for some time with Kyle Pitts. And, like, the kiss of death that, like, a lot of people are concerned about Bijan. The reason, like, the person that actually gets killed in that offense with the loss of their starting tackle is Kyle Pitts. Because they're going to need a blocking tight end out there, and that is something that, like, Kyle Pitts doesn't do. Have I done Aubie's team? I think so.
Yeah, I think that was the first team we did, or one of the first few.
And these are all recorded, so you can just quite literally scroll back into the stream, and it'll be available for you there. CJ, 14-man PPR. All right. Baker, DK, Nico Collins, Jordan Mason, Kenneth Walker, Kincaid, Garrett Wilson. So my concern for both Garrett Wilson and DK is just about the quality of the passing game. Like, I realistically have some concerns about the quality of the passing game for this specific team, but, like, I also see the vision as well. I don't think it's a bad team by really many stretches of the word, but it's definitely an interesting team now that I see that Trey Tucker's sneaking down there. Yeah, I'm kind of curious how to actually go about this one. I would consider tearing down off of Nico Collins. I like Nico Collins a lot. I think he's great, but I think he's extremely overhyped. I think you could realistically get some more quality receivers and kind of depth to make this team just stronger. And I think that's kind of what you need to do here. I think DK Metcalf is probably going to make me look like an idiot in week one somehow, because that's typically how these things go. So I don't mind kind of being a bit more optimistic with him, just because, like, the fantasy community has been debating him. He projects really well this week, funnily enough. Garrett Wilson, the fantasy hive mind is not really high on him anymore, unfortunately, so it's kind of harder to move him around. The running backs I actually think are really strong with Jordan Mason, Kenneth Walker. I think this is fine for. Baker Mayfield's overvalued, in my opinion. Madison is not an ideal bench piece for you. Jennings is a fine ascension piece in theory, and Algier's a fine handcuff. But ultimately, like, we need to kind of tier down in order to build wider to get stronger, because Trey Tucker is not going to cut it. And ultimately, like, I think we can find more upside to build and make this team stronger and more consistent, because that is one of my bigger concerns with this team. But I see the vision for what it's worth. Okay. All right. So now we have Bo Nix, Brees Hall, Alexander Madison. Why is Alexander Madison starting for some of these people? What news did I miss out on?
Who is this? If this is your team and you're watching, let me know in Discord if this is you and if you had any notes.
Yeah, I feel like this was either from, like, forever ago or something, because this team just seems to be in all sorts of situation. Because you have players that are basically just beyond irrelevant. I feel like you submitted this team from last year. Like, this has to be a team from last year, right? Because you got Diggs on Houston, McMillan was relevant, Pacheco was on IR, Jacory. Yep, yeah, this is a team from last year.
Wait.
So
you're positive.
I'm rather confident, because that's when Diggs was on Houston and Madison was on Vegas.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, hopefully this team did okay last year, but it probably did not. So,
okay. I don't know
sorry,
what that is.
Right. Let's check this one out now. Mike 6199, would you start Mason over Henderson for week 1? Yeah, I probably would. Just because like I don't really know what I'm getting with Henderson just yet. But then and you can make the same case for Mason. I'll probably get back to you on that one. Dak, CeeDee Lamb, JSN, Bucky, Henderson, Kincaid, Sutton. Okay, so that is your primary question here. Let me check something real quick. Check what the numbers say. What do the numbers mean, Mason? What do the numbers mean? All right. I would go with Trevion Henderson based off how the projections have it then. So I think this is probably the better way to have this roster built out. In theory, like you could try to build a stronger RB2, but like ultimately I'm really expecting like Henderson to become a great thing as the season progresses. I think this is a pretty strong team. Wondering if you should drop Kincaid for Strange. I personally would not do that, but if that's what you want to do, go for it. Let's see here. Oh, Sophie's home. I can see my CarPlay on my car. Even better. Dylan, 10-man PPR. All right. So we have Dak Prescott, Chase Brown, Bucky Irving, Sedarian Lamb, Garrett Wilson, Jake Ferguson. So we went with a little stacking here. Trevion Henderson, Cortland Sutton, Drakeathan May, RJ Harvey. Yeah, this is an elite team, my friend. Sutton can realistically replace Garrett Wilson in the wide receiver 2 spot, and then you can push RJ Harvey into the flex for more consistency. Ideally, like I would encourage you to try to tier up your tight end, considering how deep you are everywhere else. If you have somebody in your league that's very attached to Dak, I understand you want to be playing the stacking piece here. But considering this is managed, you don't necessarily like need to do that. So I would consider putting Drake May here. I would use Garrett Wilson as my theoretical trade piece, along with like I don't know, Jake Ferguson. It seems like everyone's fallen in love with Brenton Strange all of a sudden. I'll have to see what Liam Cohen must have said about that. But I would probably pair these two together in order to like elevate my tight end. That's kind of how I would be going about this to take it another step forward. But outside of that, it's a very, very strong team. Like
really strong wide receiver room too, almost enough to like move off of one of those guys on the bench, Pearsall or Ridley, if you want to upgrade a tight end.
Yeah, love the team though. All right, we move forward. Okay, this is looking like a dynasty. 10-man PPR Superflex Dynasty. This is season number 3 for us. All advice is welcome. Hell yeah, brother. Let's see, or sister, or whatever you identify as. We got Bo Nix, Zach Charbonnet, Ollie Gordon, Amon St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Jake Ferguson, Jalen Waddle, and Drake May. So I would consider selling Bo Nix. Just because you have Bryce Young, I think he'll take a step forward, and the bets really aren't that drastically different. The difference is like Bo Nix is going to start turning more into a pocket passer, from my understanding. The reason that like he was running so much last year was because of how like inefficient their run game was. So realistically, he should be a bit more mobile. Trying to see like I think that could be worth like capital. Like you have a lot of really strong, fun upside swings, but like your running back room is in shambles. And when you're playing in Dynasty, like you realistically do want to try to compete each year. Like, yes, I understand it's fun to build out rebuilds and you're playing with your friends more often than not. So like you're kind of cool waiting the time, but you do want to play each season to win. And this team can actually compete to win this season. It's just like you've got to make some executive decisions. Like Bo Nix is sick, but the likelihood of him having that mobile floor isn't as high this season. I think we can get some capital. I think we could even turn that into some like boring running back value. Like I'm not going to say like trade Bo Nix for Christian McCaffrey straight up. Like we can look more into like a trade calculator for like what the actual transitional cost is there. But I think we can make steps like that in order to get some kind of boring, higher projected pieces to make this team a little bit more competitive and make it an actual like true dynasty, if that makes sense. So we're transitioning, but also bringing in elite talent over time. But overall, I do like a lot of the kind of upside pieces you have. It's just going to take a little bit of them to come to fruition. All right. On to the next squadron here. And my cats are going crazy on Brash Post down here. We got Jen with a 10-man PPR. Let's check this team out. We got Kyler, James Cook, Chuba Hubbard, Zay Flowers, Sedarian Lamb, Travis Kelce, James Conner, Keon Coleman, Jake Ferguson, Tyreek Hill, Ricky Pearsall, Tony Pollard, Stafford, and Williams. All right, so same thing that we were talking about with the other people before. We don't really need Stafford. Like you have a pocket passing quarterback, but you have a mobile guy. You don't really need something behind that, right? Jake Ferguson, I think he's a fine upside swing, and we like Travis Kelce for the early part of the season while Rashee Rice is out. But ultimately, we do want to be tearing up off of Kelce over time. So we want Kelce for the short term, but we want to elevate that to another one of these elite tight ends early. Like if we can get to Trey McBride or Brock Bowers, that's where we want to be. Tyreek Hill, as everyone knows, I am basically the biggest Tyreek Hill hater out there at this point, I guess. I'm a big Jalen Waddle stan, so I will be waddling like a penguin, hopefully, for this season. If not, then I'll be in hell. So we'll see how it plays out. But what I'm kind of pointing towards there is that, like, you can use him as an elite piece to trade up and off of. Tony Pollard's going to be a bell cow while Tyjae Spears is on IR. So he's got really undervalued kind of metrics right now. My biggest thing here is that, like, I think James Cook and Chuba Hubbard are kind of like more fun, theoretically thought smarter plays than most people are expecting. I think they're not going to pay off their ADP as much as people want them to. So I would encourage trying to tier up and getting even more elite running backs. I think you're really sharp for having like very strong and undervalued bets in that of James Conner and Tony Pollard relative to their age. And these guys that are stepping up into kind of like positive regression trends, whereas these two are in negative. And that's kind of what I'm looking at this from a mental standpoint. So I could easily look like an idiot because I look like an idiot each and every single year. But that's kind of what's going on in my brain. Javonte Williams, I don't think he's going to be relevant whatsoever either. Keon Coleman, I think, is a fun upside swing because he and Ricky Pearsall are essentially the same bet. But overall, that's kind of the only gist I would change on your team is like, I like what you have here. I think you can make this even stronger when it comes to your running back room. Your receivers are elite, and I think we can take these tight ends another step forward over time. But overall, really like the squad. All righty then. Magic Man, are you a Magic fan? That's the real question. 12-man PPR, debating on adding Strange for tight end depth or stashing B-Rob since you have an open bench spot. All right, let's check it out. So we got Justin Herbert, Brian Thomas Jr., Emeka Egbuka, Jonathan Taylor, Alvin Kamara, Tyler Warren, Travion Henderson, Matthew Gay, Calvin Ridley, Corey Krosky-Merritt, Cooper Kupp, Jaden Higgins, Quinshon Judkins, and Brandon Ayuk. Okay, so similar thing with the Kamara thing. It's just like, I'm not sold he's going to have the same amount of touches that he's historically had. Who knows? Maybe I look like an idiot. Typically do. But I would encourage trying to tier up off of Alvin Kamara just so we can get like a younger, stronger, more spry back, right? Or pay for a similar tier. Like if you can flip Kamara for RJ Harvey, you're betting on younger Alvin Kamara. Like people forget what happened Alvin Kamara's rookie year. He was also at the bottom of his depth chart, just like RJ Harvey was. And guess where Alvin Kamara finished that season? As a top 10 running back in fantasy. And it was because he was being peppered in the receiving game. So we're just passing off the torch there. Travion Henderson, very exciting. So I like that you can really fill that in. And it's going to make for some very strong depth at the flex position. But my concern is really more focused towards your wide receiver too. Like I love Emeka Egbuka. I don't think you can find a person who doesn't like Emeka Egbuka. I know Jackson likes Emeka Egbuka. Hell, I think Jackson would do cartwheels for Emeka Egbuka if it took like it happens. Like, it is what it is, man. But the reality of the matter is, like, you're still betting on a wide receiver too. We want more condensed target share. There's no guarantee he's going to be like Justin Jefferson, like a lot of people are trying to project him to be right off the rip. I would encourage you to try to take another tier up for a receiver and try to build there with the Kamara piece potentially even. I do think Calvin Ridley's undervalued by the market and is going to be great, but like people are going to be quick to try to sell Calvin Ridley in week one because I imagine he's going to be getting shadowed by Pat Surtain. But we will see how that one plays out. And I also don't mind selling the hype on Jacory Krosky-Merritt, by the way, just because it's like I love the talent, but it's more like that C-Rod actually leads the kind of backfield and touches of the running backs. And JCM is just overpriced at this moment in time. He'll ascend over the times like throughout the season, but we want to sell the hype. So we're moving there. Alrighty, on to the next squadron. It's always fascinating as we scrolled through this, the amount of like different platforms you can tell are like actually hosting fantasy leagues. Because there are like so many. It's crazy. It really breaks my brain. Nameless, head-to-head, 12-man. All right. We got J.J. McCarthy, DJ Moore, George Pickens, Zach Charbonnet, Marvin Mims, Dalton Kincaid, and that is your bench. My apologies. Jaden Daniels, Christian McCaffrey, RJ Harvey, Jerry Jeudy, Monter St. Brown, Chigathan Okonkwo, Jalen Waddle. I mean, this team is beyond elite, man. I think the most complex player to try to figure out this whole entire offseason has been DJ Moore, and I got even more complex last night as I was doing more research to try to prep for this week because we're kind of now into like the true final sprint. And, of course, I'm listening to Steve Smith Sr. He's like, you want to know who I think is going to be like one of the elite receivers this year? DJ Moore. And that's just completely counterintuitive to everything I've been listening to this whole entire offseason. So I'm like, damn it, got to start thinking all over again. So I don't know where to really sit on the DJ Moore trade, but overall, I'm excited. Technically, you could upgrade this tight end room, and that is probably where I would be leaning more than anything. I think your receivers are realistically very strong. Jerry Jeudy, in theory, he's going to pop in this first game. I would be selling because the Joe Flacco experience is going to be limited, and this is like one of the few good spots that they have early on. So like I would be moving off of any Cleveland equity as quick as possible. And tight end, I think you can upgrade this realistically. Like that's something I would be looking at. I like the receivers, but if we can always upgrade and get better, that's what we want to do. JJ McCarthy, you have Jaden Daniels, same thing we talked about before. You don't need that. And you can technically make the same application for Dalton Kincaid and Chigakonkwo. I do have some concerns about Chigakonkwo's like longevity for the season, but overall, I think he should be great for the early part of the year. All righty then, on to the next one. You were leaning starting with Tillman over Rice in your ESPN league. Well, I would encourage you to do that because Rice is going to get you 0 points. Tillman should be able to get you, what is he currently projected for?
Like 11.
Check the numbers. What are you guessing, Jackson?
I'm guessing 11.1.
Dude is on the dot with it. Oh my God.
Is it 11.1?
11.1 on the dot.
Let's go. Wow.
Okay, so here we got Drake May, Jerome Ford, Kenneth Walker, Puka Nacua, Brian Thomas Jr., Trey McBride, Rashee Rice. So you got an absolute monster once we get into the late part. And we haven't even talked about your bench yet. Like, oh my gosh, you even got RJ Harvey here with Deebo Samuel. This thing's just hammering on the table. It's got the meat dropping on the table. All you're hearing is this. So I don't know what to tell you. Very exciting squad here. Really, really like it, as you can tell. Built it really well. In theory, you can make an argument to say your flex spot needs to take a step further, and I think that is probably the direction I would theoretically push you towards. I think it's very well built for right now. I think the only thing you can technically do is like sell the hype on Corey Krosky-Merritt. Maybe Jerome Ford gets excited in week 1 and like try to upgrade. But overall, I think this is a very, very strong team. I really like what you built here.
Yeah, come week 7, this team is going to be pretty damn tough to stop.
Facts. I mean, you have 3 different guys who would probably all have over 30% target shares that are all considered to be in the these are all dark horse wide receiver 1 candidates.
Yeah.
Trey McBride, this is the funniest argument that I've heard throughout the offseason. Not argument, but it really clicked with me when somebody pointed this out because I've always pointed out it's like Trey McBride and Brock Bowers were top 5 in receptions last year, right? So it's like, okay, were we probably drafting them next year if they continue that momentum? We're probably drafting them in the early part of the first where we're drafting the other guys who are already top 5 in receptions from last year. So we'll see if that plays out. All right. On to the next squad, I see my homies. If I can click out of this. Went a little too far. Don't know how to pronounce that, but we're in a 12-man PPR. All right, so we got Mahomes, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, A.J. Brown, George Pickens, Trey McBride, Calvin Ridley. The bench makes me throw up at some points of it. I won't lie to you, but I see the vision. So you really don't need Patrick Mahomes on this squad. You have no correlation for it. There's no true upside. It's just name brand value. Now, could he easily produce as a QB1 overall this season? 100%, in which case correlation doesn't matter for anything. But I still prefer to try to make correlated bets where I can because you don't need the only correlation you have here is Patrick Mahomes with Harrison Butker, and there's not a lot of correlation there, unfortunately. Braylon Allen's a fun upside swing, so you're playing both sides of that bet, which I think is fine ultimately. Amari Cooper is a 0 in my mind. Ramondre is fine for the early part of the season. Javonte makes me want to throw up. Jalen Coker's a good guy to have on IR. Najee's a good bet. But when I'm looking at this squad, the big thing that I keep kind of looking back to is that you can ultimately make Calvin Ridley or George Pickens probably a good, consistent flex option. But I think we can tier these higher. I think we can ultimately make these into a round 1 player if we really wanted to. But I think it's a fine squad for at least a baseline. I think we can upgrade our wide receiver 2. I think we can realistically upgrade the flex spot. And that's kind of how I would look at it. I would not be set in having to keep Patrick Mahomes. I would look at whoever the Patrick Mahomes owner is and consider seeing if you can package him in a deal of some variety. Because at the end of the day, when you take away the name brand value, he is just a pocket passer. So we'll see how that one plays out. But that would be kind of my general thoughts there. I think you're probably the only person that I've seen through this so far that has the Cardinals. Oh, there's one person aside from you that I saw that has the Cardinals defense. And that is one of the better ones to be rostering for this week. Try to see who else has the good defenses. Rams. Okay, so a few people have the Cardinals, so not as few as I thought, but Cardinals in theory are the defense that you would want for this week. All right, where were we? We were here. All right, on to the next quadrant. Jay Kelvin, 10-man PPR. All right, Jalen Hurts, DeAndre Swift, Kyron Williams, CeeDee Lamb, Matt McConkey, Tucker Kraft, Jameson Williams. Yeah, I mean, you're going to get the similar kind of treatment of like the quarterback and tight end combo that we've had with a few of these other teams in the sense like you really just don't need to double tap them. Like you have the eliteness that you've kind of paid for. But I don't mind having both Tucker Kraft and Colson Levitt, I guess, considering how high I am on both of them. My biggest thing here is that like I think you can maybe make your RB2 better. It's really kind of pointing more towards your flex spot. Like you've got a lot of really fun options. I just think the bigger question comes more towards consistency for your flex. Because I like the Jameson Williams play. I think he could easily break fantasy. But I'm also concerned that like he's not going to be the most consistent player in the world as well. But overall, I think this is a very strong and well-built team. I'm just not really big on the DeAndre Swift project. So I guess my big thing would be like, and why I point towards the flex is because Kyron and RJ I'm cool with, but Swift, we'll see how that one plays out over time.
Probably use like Loveland or something to tier up.
I concur. All right, on to the next one here. We have 10-man half PPR. Bo Nix, James Cook, Bijan Robinson, Mike Evans, Puka Nacua, Evan Ingram, T. Higgins, Troy Franklin, definitely a swing to have on the bench.
A lot of Broncos. I have a feeling this is a Broncos fan.
Yeah, I think he's a Broncos fan, especially with the Broncos defense. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very strong team. Nothing to kind of degrade against that. I see worlds where Evan Ingram is phenomenal, and I see worlds where he kind of isn't the value you truly want, right? But ultimately, I would be moving off of James Cook, and we talked about kind of being a bit more concerned with Bo Nix, but considering how in on the Broncos it looks like you are with this roster, I'd be a bit more hesitant. I would be like, for what it's worth, I'd be willing to flip James Cook for RJ Harvey straight up, but that's just me. You can probably get more value from James Cook than just RJ Harvey, considering how the majority of people look at him in leagues and where I saw him going in an ESPN draft the other day. So I would be looking to move off of James Cook to something else. I think your receivers are elite for what it's worth, but I want some more consistency for the running back room is what I'm looking at. And by that, I mean just like somebody that you can stick in the flex. So when you're looking at like RJ Harvey and like these other ones, you're just feeling safe and consistent. Because T. Higgins is great, but we'll see. Should you package Worthy with a starter to upgrade this position? This is your team. Okay. I'd be willing to pivot off of Bo Nix. I think there's a lot of people that are very, very high on Bo Nix, Spencer. And I quite literally heard this because I went to the gym right before this because I was like, all right, I want to try to get some more coach speak in. And the best place for me to like really listen in and dial in what the coaches are saying is in the gym because it's just me, the machines, and him in my ears. And that of, well, geez, pause. Anyways, and what I mean by that is that like what Sean Payton was saying is that he's just like the reason that like Bo Nix was having to scramble so much last year was because our run game was not efficient. Like we did not have a run game whatsoever. This year, we're like to think that we're going to be able to have an efficient run game. So the baseline of the floor that people are expecting Bo Nix to have from a rushing standpoint, I'm not expecting it to be there as much this year. So I'm interested in moving off of him and trying to get like Drake May, for example, who goes at a cheaper cost. So you should be able to pull that off in theory. James Cook, I like tearing down from because I have concerns about the just hyper efficiency he had last year and that being able to maintain. And then like T. Higgins is great. Like I just think that like people are looking at the value a little bit too highly because realistically the bet between him and George Pickens isn't that much different. Just the cost is what's different. And I think you can like tear down from him if you really wanted to. I like keeping Xavier Worthy because his price hasn't changed all offseason, but the situation around him has changed drastically compared to what happened last year. Instead of like Rashee Rice not being suspended this season, he's now been suspended for the first 6 games of the season. Price didn't change. They got arguably the steal of the draft in Josh Simmons. Price didn't change. The big emphasis coming out of camp is this: they want to focus on Mahomes getting the deep ball down because each year he picks one thing he wants to get better at. Price is still yet to change. So I personally want to be holding more Xavier Worthy because if Rashee Rice was playing those first 6 games, I would be pounding the table and saying Mahomes is throwing for 50 touchdowns this year. It just seems like that's kind of how the stars are aligning. That's part of why I'm a little bit more comfortable moving off of T. Higgins and going towards Xavier Worthy, because the concerns that T. Higgins has is that they have poor offensive line play, and Joe Burrow is coming off of a very high TD rate season. Just the difference is, like, this is the only season I think Joe Burrow's come into an actual season healthy, and he could just be realistically playing in his prime, and we won't ever be able to see performance like this again. So that's kind of the elongated logic there, and kind of how I would be navigating this specific roster. All right, on to the next squadron. Twin. I'm gonna call this team Twin. I'm not gonna say that, but I'll end it with Twin because that's what you say at the end of that. 12-man PPR. Drake May, Chase Brown, Bucky. I feel like you had so much fun writing that in the speakers notes. You're just like, ah.
I was like, I was 50s on whether or not I was going to get you to say it.
Fair enough. All right. But we got Drake May, Chase Brown, Bucky Irving, Jamar Chase, Marvin Harrison, Tyler Warren, T-Mac. This team is cooking with straight gas. We got Justin Fields, Hunter Henry, Rashee Rice, Jalen Waddle. I mean, I look like Randy Marsh in that one meme of South Park, just like without, you get what I mean. So yeah, this team's a monster. I don't know what else to tell you. Like, I could theoretically try to tell you to like upgrade off of Tyler Warren maybe and try to see if you can get like, trying to think, like, literally, like, all I can try to encourage you is like try to get Tyler Warren to upgrade to like Brock Bowers or Trey McBride or something. But this team is a monster. I would consider Waddle over Marvin Harrison, and the reason I would say that is I'll check the projections for you real quick.
You think Waddle over Marv instead of Waddle over Tet week 1?
Yeah, because Tet is going to arguably be in contest for 150 targets this year. Marv, the issue with him is that Kyler can't see over his center. So it's a bit more difficult for him. Waddle, I think, is just under projected by the market. I do think Marv is in a very soft matchup, but I just think that he's going to be in a more competitive matchup, in which case he's going to have to be used more. And I don't think Tyreek Hill is the wide receiver 1. And if he is the wide receiver 1, then realistically, I believe that Waddle is very underprojected by the market. Let's see what Tyreek's projection is. So Tyreek's at 14.8, and then Marv Harrison is at 13.6. And then Waddle's around 12, right? Yeah, Waddle's at 12 flat. So I just think that like Waddle's realistically the wide receiver 1, and the projections just aren't there yet for it. And we'll see how it plays out. But ultimately, I really like this team. I think it's really strong. You can realistically trade off of Justin Fields as like if you want, or yeah, that's really all you can do is try to upgrade in theory Drake May to an even higher tier in Tyler Warren. But this is a super team. All right, on to the next squadron. All right, so no notes, but we got Baker, Marion Hampton, Bijan Robinson, AJ Brown, Mike Evans, Jake Ferguson, Marvin Harrison Jr., the man of the women, Harrison Butker, Jordan Addison, Braylon Allen, Travis Hunter, Burke Purdy, Bashal Tootin, undervalued Sir Warren. Okay, so in theory, we want a more consistent tight end. I think like Ferguson could get there just off of like the pure amount of pass attempts that Dak likely will have, but also not like sold that's a guarantee to happen. You know what I mean? And that like, and what I mean, I guess the best way to like elaborate on this is like, I want as many guys that I can envision being the guaranteed second target in their offense. I don't want to have to bet that like the volume has to get there or he has like just an insane touchdown rate. I don't want to be making that many bets like that as possible. And I already know the offense is likely going to be more condensed towards George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb, but that's just the 2 cents there. I would ideally like a more consistent third option than Marv. Like, I think Marv is talented for what it's worth, and I think he's a great receiver. It's just more about the scheme relative to the cost that you're paying. And when you're typically playing in a like redraft type of format, you want consistent points more often than not. And that's really easy to find with running backs more than anything. So I think you're going to have a lot of value with Jalen Warren. And there's a very real chance because they're playing the Saints in week 1 that Marv goes nuclear, right? Like they're playing against a really soft defense. They have an extremely high win total. I think it's really a matchup that favors someone like more like James Conner, but you never know. Like you don't really like, that's why Vegas is making so much money, right? We don't know where all the touchdowns are going to go each weekend. So I think it's worth kind of potentially looking there. I would encourage moving off of Baker. I know that's something that's considered sacrilegious here. but like he's probably not going to have the same rushing floor that he did. He's not going to have nearly as high of a touchdown rate. I hate to break it to you. So I'm a bit more skeptic there, and I want some more consistent like points that I can find. I love the toot and swing. I think Brock Purdy is really the better play between him and Baker Mayfield, at least in terms of like who's probably going to have a better fantasy season. Love the upside swing with Travis Hunter, and that's part of why I'm fine getting off of Marvin Harrison Jr. as well, is because I think that Travis Hunter is really going to be able to outproduce him. So we will see how that one plays out, but that's kind of the general gist of what I would be doing with this team. I'm cool with Hampton. I love Bijan. I like your receiving core a lot. And once Addison's back, we'll see if he spikes back. Alrighty then, on to the next squad here. We have no notes for this one, but we have Bo Nix, Nico Collins, Devonta Smith, Achane, Henderson, Warren, Mooney, Tracy, Luther Burden, Sampson, Rice, and Ollie. So we've talked over this Bo Nix point a few times. It's just like we don't think he's going to have the same level of ceiling that he did last year because the run game should be efficient. So like him having to scramble as much isn't going to be as necessary. Nico Collins, I have concerns, and I don't mind tearing down from him personally, but that's just me. Mainly, what I mean by tearing down is like people don't value Puka Nacua nearly as much, but they value Nico Collins, and I think you can pull that off pretty easily. Devonta Smith, I like. He's one of the most underrated receivers in the league, but in terms of like fantasy value, it's a bit more difficult to get him there just because he is like the second option, well, mostly like third option, but like second option in the offensive technicality from the passing game. So it's like when he hits well. But once like it's harder to get him there consistently, is I guess kind of the concern. So for me, he's more of like a better and best ball play where it's like I know when he hits on a weekend, he's going to hit hard. But like when he doesn't, it's going to be kind of like really. But I love that you have Rashee Rice up for what it's worth. Just the concern for this team primarily is like it's going to take a little bit of time for it to get going and cooking gas. And that's why like I'm cool with tearing down a little bit. I do think Darnell Mooney is kind of a fun swing, but like I like him more for best ball. I think you can really tear down from Tyler Warren because people are a little bit too excited for what they're probably going to be getting out of these rookie tight ends right out the gate. But we will see. You never know. You don't have anything that's like too hyped up to kind of tear off of, unfortunately. But like Bo Nix would be the one that I would consider throwing in the equation just because people are a little too excited there. Same thing with Nico Collins. But that's my 2 cents. Also don't want to steal your ice cream in case those are your favorite flavors. So on to the next one here. We've got a 12-team league with Jaden Daniels, Puka Nacua, Xavier Worthy, Omarion Hampton, Brockathan Bowers, Trevin Henderson, and Tyrone Tracy Jr. All right, on the bench, though, we have Garrett Wilson and Emeka Egbuka. I don't understand why Emeka or Garrett Wilson are on the bench over. Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, so similar kind of things that we've emphasized with previous people is that like you don't need an additional tight end or quarterback if you have Jaden Daniels and Brock Bowers, right? You have a hypermobile quarterback that's in contention to be the QB1 in fantasy. You have quite literally what's projected to be the tight end 1 in fantasy. You are not subbing these guys out ever. So you don't need Kincaid. You don't need Herbert. You can try to utilize them as leverage in like trades, for example, but ultimately like you don't need them. So I like Garrett Wilson. My biggest thing here would be improving your RB2 flex here of Tyrone Tracy. This is the area I would be trying to improve. You could even
honestly, how is their bench so good, considering they drafted both Kincaid and Herbert?
It's got to be a much smaller league they're leading on. But
yeah, and I guess JCM was probably waivers, but yeah.
I would consider trading up and off of JCM for much better play for consistency, and this team in theory. Very strong team. You can even make an argument to try to get like more consistent wide receiver 2 play, but I think Worthy's gonna make all the fantasy football spreadsheet socialists like myself look like idiots that try to galaxy brain Mahomes not being able to hit a deep ball because let's be honest, it's Mahomes. I think he'll figure out how to throw a deep ball over time. Yeah. All right, on to the next squadron here. We have a 12-man PPR on Yahoo. Main concern is Achane and wants some ideas, might be for a better week-to-week. Okay, let's see here. So you have Dax, Sedarian, DK, Achane, Hobart, Hampton, David Njoku, Travion Henderson, Ridley, Myers, Fields, Chubb, Pittman, Kyle Pitts. All right, so David Njoku is going to be a massive start for me this week. He's going to be awesome. I'm expecting him to be a hyper nuke for fantasy this week. But with that said, we want to be moving off of David Njoku as quickly as possible because I have a very hard time believing that Flacco is going to make it through the season, and that is what brings value to these Cleveland pass catchers. If we're having to deal with Dylan Gabriel or Shador Sanders throwing the ball on this schedule, David Njoku is beyond cooked, and it's not even funny. So I think that's the person I am more concerned with. DK Metcalf, someone who projects well, so I'm fine with him. CeeDee Lamb, you have a stack with Dak, so you understand his situation. Hampton and Achane are fine. I just think that Hampton's floor is a little bit lower than people would care to admit. Kyle Pitts, I get the meme. It's just like you don't need him. But like I would be trying to tier up in terms of the tight end room would be my biggest emphasis here because like Njoku will probably go for like 20 fantasy points this week and people will just be like, oh my God, David Njoku, he's amazing. In which case then you can get better value there. Fields, I honestly think should be your starting quarterback consistently, but that is just my 2 cents and kind of reference back to what we've talked about a lot with these other guys. Ridley, I think he's great. I think you can really start him at about any time. But overall, very solid squad. The only like real concern for me is that like I think you could attack higher floors and ceilings with some other players, but ultimately, like I think you're going to want to find a different tight end before we get to the end of this. But yeah, that's really about it. Also, since I see you have Nick Chubb, I would consider looking at Woody Marks on the Texans, just because his profile is going to fit a lot more with how that team's kind of projected to go about their season this year, considering the poor offensive line play and how pass sensitive it'll likely be. So with that said, I think we got through every single team here. Took us about an hour of me monologuing and Jackson being patient and fortunately being an awesome co-host with me here and hanging out. But yeah, we'll be back again next week to chat some more fantasy football teams with you guys and go through the various kind of things that we've learned in general about the week, because we'll have week 1 done by then. We'll see what adjustments we've made that were wise, ones that were dumb, and what ones that we can make that'll be intelligent going forward. So
and make sure to join the Discord. Last note, a lot like 24/7 fantasy advice in there from both Wells and I, and our appointed fantasy football experts in the fantasy channel. Also, lots of fun free to play contests to win you money on PredictionStrike in there.
Oh yeah, and I would take Ollie Gordon because he could easily just have a standalone role and be relevant for fantasy if the Dolphins are better than expected. So with that said, appreciate you guys. Subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time, peace, y'all.